two, one, two, three.
Hello and welcome to Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. I'm here today with Taylor Moon, and we'll be talking about the REST Act. First, though, I'm going to indulge in my habit of remembering the past. In 2020 and 2021, the inquiring socialist was learning about ETPA, the Emergency Tenant Protection Act. It had begun in 1974 as a New York state law that protected tenants in New York City and a couple of neighboring cities, but not around the state. Essentially, it set limits on the amount by which rents could be raised. Then, in 2019, tenant agitation brought a great victory in Albany, and the new legislation allowed cities and counties around the state to opt in to ETPA. Ithaca DSA began a campaign to do just that. At that time, the chapter had regular educational meetings. I recall being very frustrated when I was told that I could talk about the act, but for no more than 5 minutes. Luckily, the political education people did later allow an advocate from Citizen Action in Albany to speak at greater length. And later, we interviewed her for this show. What were the shortcomings of ETPA? It was very wonky. It applied only to buildings built before 1974, the year that the bill passed, and it applied only to buildings with 6 or more apartments. There was an appointed board that determined what was a reasonable rent raise. The municipality had to conduct or contract for a vacancy study. Real estate interests often followed with a lawsuit. Also, the municipality had to be careful that the study covered only relevant older apartments. Imagine if a vacancy study counted the vacancies in Library Place these days, where apartments stay vacant just because the rents are excessively high. ETPA was careful to allow rent raises after major repairs and improvements. As I said at the outset, I am talking today with Taylor Moon, co-chair of the Ithaca Tenants Union. He has news that there is a replacement act before the state legislature that would make this kind of rent regulation easier for municipalities to get. So, Taylor, what is the act called?
So the sort of concise acronym is called the REST Act, which stands for the Rent Emergency Stabilization for Tenants Act. I think that's something of a backronym where they had the idea that they wanted, and they worked backwards to get the name. But there you have it.
And what are the bill numbers?
Um, Sorry, I don't actually have those in front of me.
I did make a note of them, so I'll read them off. And who introduced it?
Brian Kavanagh in the Senate and Sarahana Shrestha in the Assembly. And it's worth mentioning that Sarahana is a DSA elected.
Yes, and not the first time that
Yeah.
DSA electeds introduce valuable legislation. Do our own assembly person and state senator support it?
Yes, they are. So the tenants union tried contacting them from the very beginning of when this was starting to be introduced.
When was
Uh,
that, by the
it
way?
was, I don't have the exact timeline, but it was about a year ago that we started to have the kind of rumblings of it,
Uh-huh.
just through our connections to Sarahana in particular. Um, and I think we started to try to contact them in like December of last year. And I think in both cases, ended up not being able to have a direct conversation with them about the legislation as we had hoped to. But without us needing to really push them very much at all, they ended up both signing on as co-sponsors. So I think that we can ultimately count that as a win, even if we didn't end up having that direct contact.
Right. Well, I'm sure the first re when you say it was last December, I'm sure the first reason was that the bills didn't even have numbers yet.
Yes.
And
That was the
this,
first question they asked me when I reached out was what
yeah,
was the bill number? And I was like, well, we don't have the number yet, but here's
yeah,
the
here's the
legislation.
idea.
Yeah.
Um,
And it was
and
something that they could have looked up
yeah,
at that point.
well, not in December, I don't think,
Um,
because this is a
yeah,
new session.
right. I don't think it had been introduced formally,
Yeah,
but the proposal that Sarahana and Kavanaugh were going to put forward each were available at that
yeah.
point.
And then I would expect that after that there was something of a delay due to the grandiose budget struggle.
Yes, I'm sure that that was a major factor. Yeah.
But anyway, both Anna Kellis in the Assembly and Leah Webb in the State Senate are co-sponsors, which is good. Doesn't entirely end the struggle for tenants, though.
No. And I can talk about the strategy there in a little bit, but I
Yeah.
think we have some other things that we want to get
Oh,
to first.
sure. Um, so first of all, how is this act different from ETPA?
Yeah. Um, so in many ways, this is sort of a technocratic fix to that bill. And so it's one of those pieces of legislation that I think can be somewhat difficult to explain to somebody who isn't deeply invested in this, why it's exciting. But for those of us who have been in the trenches trying to get a city like Ithaca to opt into ETPA for years now, this is one of the most exciting developments possible. So, as you explained at the beginning, ETPA was initially adopted in New York City as a very specific uh, response in like 1974, and it kind of tried to stay frozen in time as to like which buildings it applied to and everything. In 2019, it was expanded to apply to all of upstate New York, but they didn't fundamentally change the requirements and the time or like which buildings that it applied to. And so what that means is that we kind of had this like frankly a Frankenstein bill that had these antiquated limits in it about only applying to buildings that were about 50 years old at this or over 50 years old today.
Yeah.
Um, and also really required this vacancy study in order to be enacted. Um, and that is a major hurdle. Not only does it cost a lot of money for a city to conduct a vacancy study, often I think we were seeing numbers of like several $100,000, um, if I'm remembering those numbers correctly. Um, but even more important was that every municipality that had conducted this study, done the process as best as they were able to according to the law, had uh, the real estate interests go in and challenge the vacancy study in court. And because there are so many intricate details associated with that study, it was very easy for them to find one particular reason like, as you mentioned, the wrong buildings being included in the study, more recently built ones. And ultimately, those cities had ETPA undone after, the city had spent enormous amounts of money on it, after activists had put in a lot of time and effort into getting the city to opt in, all for it to just kind of come crumbling apart. And for cities like Ithaca, the tenants union has been struggling alongside Ithaca DSA to get the city to opt in. And at this point, the city has nominally said that it wants to opt in. I believe that even at one point they set aside money for the vacancy study.
Yes, they
But
did.
yeah, you were more
Jorge
consistently, yeah,
Difendini got that
yeah,
done.
right. One of the many reasons that we can be excited that it seems that he will be back on Common Council. Uh, um, and it has still stagnated here for fear that
Yeah.
the study will be questioned and overturned.
Well, I also recall hearing skepticism that surely there were not enough apartments that would even qualify legally to make it worthwhile. And I spent quite a bit of time back those 5 or so years ago. First of all, there had been a study out of New York City where somebody estimated that in Ithaca there were 1,900 eligible units.
Hmm.
But then people expressed skepticism, surely not that many. Somebody came up with something where they counted buildings rather than units, which was a clear mistake. But I just went out on the streets and walked around and eyeballed the buildings and basically to determine how many apartments used the number of mailboxes and to determine the age of the building, eyeballed the building. Now, there were also, especially for larger buildings, I could do some online research because those larger apartment complexes usually have nice write-ups, and sometimes they say built in such and such year, opened in such and such year, so and so is the famous architect, whatever. So I think I came up with about 1,400 units that, I felt I had witnessed from the street. And I
Yeah,
knew I hadn't covered all of them.
right. And I think that there certainly are quite a few apartments in town, especially a lot of the ones that are continuing to cater to lower income households that would be affected by it. And I mean, kind of my response to the claim that it's not worth it, it's, it's kind of to ask, in what sense, right? I mean, yes, it's a big expenditure of money to do the vacancy study, but that's the biggest con in my mind, um, to doing it only for a limited number of apartments. And when you're allowing potentially about 2,000 households uh, to have a degree of stability that they would not otherwise have, I think that that is pretty easily justified. But returning to the question of how it kind of differs from ETPA, doing away with the vacancy study is the biggest and most exciting one. Um, and it replaces, or I mean, the whole notion is that this, or opting in, you are declaring a rental emergency where there are too, or in a sense that there are too few vacant apartments, and that housing prices are becoming disproportionately expensive because of that. And it expands the kinds of readily available data that can be used to declare that emergency. It looks at things like rent rolls, overall housing supply, census data, and a few different homelessness metrics, so point in time studies, shelter occupancy, and so on, that all of which are readily available to cities and are much easier to not only to study in the first place, but to do so in a way that um, cannot be questioned, right? You can pretty easily filter for, okay, only include buildings built after this year in doing the study. Um, and so that means that it's eliminating this expensive process and making it so that when cities do opt in, it is more likely to actually be upheld. I already mentioned the that it changed it from being a 1974 cutoff to a rolling 15-year window where anything that had been built or substantially improved within the last 15 years would not be included in these regulations. Everything else would be above a certain size.
Yeah. Does the size remain the same?
It
Six.
changed the size so that basically so that it can be as low as 1 unit. And it allows municipalities to set that
Oh,
standard.
okay. So it can be more individualized to the needs of the municipality.
Yes. Which is something that I think is a big win, especially for towns like Ithaca, where our rental markets are going to be pretty unique and different from much bigger cities overall, and cities that don't have as large of renter populations as we do.
Hmm. Is there, by the way, is there any provision for more than one municipality in a county opting in together?
Oh, I'm not actually sure about that. I mean, I know that kind of the intention is that individual municipalities need to opt in. And I believe that it's at this essentially the city or town level rather than at the county level.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I ask that especially because at some point I had a conversation with the mayor of the village of Lansing who expressed interest.
Oh, that's good to
Yeah.
hear.
So, and it is still the same mayor. So there may be an ally there, so to
Yeah.
speak. And with the new dating of the buildings, that should open up most of the village of Lansing to it. There are these great tracts of apartments around the malls
Yeah.
that now should all qualify. Again, I remember back when looking at dates and oh, they were just on the line,
Yeah.
and maybe some had opened in 1975.
Right.
The Rent Guidelines Board, what remains similar?
I believe that it is basically the same structure as before, that it is going to be composed of um, a mixture of tenants, community members, and landlords, um, and that they will actually set the uh, rent increases every year, according to a few different standards.
And what is the strategy now for getting it passed?
Yeah. So the statewide coalition, Housing Justice for All, really is focused on this legislation right now and has brought together a number of more local groups, including the Ithaca Tenants Union. And because they cannot act, I don't remember the exact 501c3, 501c4 distinction, but Housing Justice for All cannot directly politically lobby. Um, and as such, they are encouraging a separate outgrowth from the tenants organizations around the state to build a tenancy block where we, in addition to going around and collecting petition signatures showing the immense amount of support that we have, for this legislation, we are trying to build a network of people who are motivated to vote on the basis of people um, of electeds voting in the interest of tenants. Um, and building up a large coalition of people so that moving forward, we can continue to build the momentum. Um, and as I said, have a strong petition base to demonstrate the level of interest in this particular legislation. Um, in Ithaca, we have slightly eased up on that push a little bit lately, purely because we've been very focused on getting our local DSA and ITU endorsed Common Council candidates past the primary hurdle, which we're pleased to say that they both won the Democratic nomination. And additionally, with both of our representatives having signed on to be co-sponsors, it feels less urgent. It is still part of the strategy overall to work on getting about 1,000 signatures from Ithaca in particular, just to contribute to the overall message that we're sending to Albany. I just wanted to illustrate how it could fit in with good cause eviction and
Oh,
how,
yes.
in some sense, good cause eviction is a lower level of rent stabilization that prevents price gouging, but very little else. And in essence, that sets the limit at about 10%. It gets a little more complicated in terms of also factoring in consumer price index that could put it a bit lower than 10%. But anyway, the point being that there's essentially metrics in there to stop landlords from just jacking up your rent in order to get you to leave. And there's vanishingly few reasons why a landlord would need to increase your rent more than that. And there are exceptions. If they need to make major renovations, they can still do so and increase your rent accordingly. But for just maintaining the same space, they shouldn't need to raise it that much.
Yeah, I mean, I think good cause was largely about not allowing retaliatory evictions. That
Yes.
is, evictions that have nothing to do with a tenant failing to pay rent or destroying something or being a nuisance, but rather had to do with a tenant reporting to the landlord that something was not working in the apartment.
Yeah. And also it's a anti-discrimination measure as well, right?
Yes.
It is very common for black and brown people to be no cause evicted or non-renewed disproportionately, as well as trans and LGBT people in general. So that was also a key part of why we pushed for it.
Okay. But we got it.
Yes. We got it statewide, and then last year, Ithaca opted into the strongest possible version of it after
Okay.
lots of work from local activists. The issue is that in a rental market that is as saturated with renters as something like Ithaca is, that really is insufficient. And the REST Act will place a more stringent cap on actually limiting rents year to year that are based on a more holistic overview of factors.
So have you been out canvassing?
Yes, I have not as much for the REST Act recently. Again, with the focus shifting a lot towards canvassing for candidates in the last few months. But I have been out between REST Act and ETPA. I've done quite a bit of canvassing.
So I'm just wondering
Yeah.
what your experiences were.
I mean, the single biggest thing that has been remarkable about canvassing for this issue has been that, like, it is the fastest I have ever seen people open their doors. Right? You come knocking on people's doors, they ask you, like, who is it? You tell them that you're canvassing for a political candidate, and all of a sudden they're like, oh no, I'm busy, I can't talk. But you're like, hi, I'd like to talk to you about preventing your rents from going up. And they're at the door immediately. And like that is just something that people who are not normal voters are interested in enough to like engage with you and talk with you for a long time. A lot of our canvassing has been over in West Village, a largely affordable, largely Section 8 housing complex in Ithaca, and it's one of the few affordable complexes left, and it has very low voter registration. Um, and those who are registered, we've learned over time, very rarely come out to vote. But um, talking with those people there, I have had people who do not at least there seem to be politically involved in their day-to-day lives be willing to sit there and talk with me and like really asking a lot of questions about how this could impact them. And, we'll have conversations with me for 15, 20 minutes sometimes. And I think that that is a real testament to just like politics that starts with addressing people's actual needs is always going to be the strongest politics.
Sure, that's for sure, I think. Thank you, Taylor. I've been talking with Taylor Moon of the Ithaca Tenants Union about the REST Act, A 4877A and S 4659A. It is in the legislature, and both Anna Kellis and Leah Webb are co-sponsors. So things are looking hopeful. This has been Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. Thanks for watching.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.